Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were placed on the moon in 1969, courtesy of 400,000 NASA personnel and contractors. Yet, it only took one person to disseminate the myth that the moon landing was fake. Bill Kaysing was the name. All of the controversies relevant to the Apollo mission will now become a relic from the past as NASA is planning to send a new mission to the moon. The operation is called Artemis, and today, we're going to be breaking it down for you.
Let's get down to business.
In Greek mythology, the twin sister of Apollo and the lunar goddess is known as Artemis. Therefore, the connection to the expedition that sent the first humans to the moon over 50 years ago, it's obvious. This crewless mission, formerly dubbed Exploration Mission 1, is a thorough test of the space launch system in the Orion module. The space launch system generates 8.8 million pounds of thrust and 1.3 million more pounds while lifting off, making it more potent than the Saturn V rocket in the Apollo missions. It's the most formidable rocket ever created. Artemis 1 will travel roughly 64,373 miles into deep space after traveling about 450,000 kilometers to the moon, which will orbit 400 kilometers above the lunar surface. The module was splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, not far from California, on December 11th after a 25.5-day mission. Several experiments that will be conducted in deep space are on board this mission. These are intended to bring advanced technological leaps, shed light on deep space radiation, and increase our understanding of the moon. 3 moonikins, or mannequins, dressed in the first-generation Orion crew survival spacesuit that the actual astronauts will wear on Artemis 2 and 3, are also on board. The moonikins have sensors to collect information about potential flight experiences for human crew members. Why is NASA actually willing to land humans on the moon again? Well, let's find out. With Artemis, NASA wants to travel to the moon and stay there, rather than merely attempting to duplicate the accomplishment of the Apollo missions. Even if the main objective is to send people back to the moon by the middle of the decade, this entails looking into the feasibility of setting up bases in both lunar orbit and on the lunar surface. One of NASA's main objectives is the first landing of a woman and a person of color on the lunar surface. Because that's worth the expenditure of money just to say that we did that to appease people that might think NASA's racist/homophobic. Seems like a weird priority for a billions upon billions of dollar space mission. But that's the end of that comment. Woo! Future deep space missions will be made possible by technologies currently under development, which range from rockets to spacesuits. The Artemis program is one of NASA's first significant partnerships with for-profit businesses, including SpaceX and Boeing. NASA asserts that this upcoming series of missions will be able to recover samples more strategically than Apollo, since more is known about the moon today than 50 years back, and technology has substantially evolved. Both scientific and commercial investigation and exploitation are possible due to the finding of water on the moon and probable deposits of rare minerals. Now that the objectives are all clear, let's proceed. But wait, how are they going to get there again? NASA's strategic plan to get back on the moon revolves around 4 main components: the Orion spacecraft, Lunar Gateway, Moon Landing Module, and Space Launch System. Equipped with life support systems and shuttle interfaces, Orion is the command module needed to transport the astronauts through space. As a versatile launch pad for missions to the moon and beyond, the Lunar Gateway is a tiny space station circling the moon. The astronauts will transfer into the Lunar Landing Module after the Orion module docks with Gateway. The Lunar Gateway, unlike the International Space Station, won't be permanently manned. Instead, it'll act as a platform where astronauts can temporarily dwell and conduct research. In addition, it can carry on with scientific studies even in between human lunar flights. NASA is collaborating with international organizations like the European Space Agency on the architecture of the Lunar Gateway. From the Lunar Gateway, goods and people will be transported to the moon's surface by lunar landing vehicles. NASA is collaborating with private companies to create human landing system, known as HLS, and several other robotic and cargo cars. The landing system for the Artemis missions are intended to be used for more trips than the lunar module for Apollo, which was only designed to be used for one return trip to the moon's surface. Finally, SLS, the launcher that will lift them into space and beyond Earth's atmosphere, connects all of these components. This 322-foot super heavy lift rocket is anticipated to cost $800 million a launch, and it's taller than the Statue of Liberty. In addition, the SLS is 15% more powerful than the original Saturn V launch vehicle that launched astronauts to the moon for the first time, making it the most powerful rocket in the world. NASA has been developing the launcher for the last 10 years despite numerous setbacks and escalating expenses. Despite the challenges, Artemis 1 is not the end of the story. NASA is planning to conduct a number of missions under the umbrella of Artemis to make sure that human presence on the moon is not only possible, but fruitful. Bang after Artemis 1, Artemis 2 will commence. This Artemis program will conduct a groundbreaking crewed spaceflight on the mission that will propel humans farther into space than ever before. The 4-person crew will fly the Orion module 7,402 kilometers beyond the moon's far side after being forced into space by the SLS rocket, complete a lunar flyby, and then return to Earth. In addition, the mission, which will last 8 to 10 days, will gather important flight test data. After Apollo 17 in 1972, the third mission to the moon is scheduled to provide the first moon landing ever. 4 astronauts on board the Orion module would continue the legacy of the Artemis II mission by docking with the Lunar Gateway and spending 30 days in space. The 2 astronauts will then be transported by the human landing system to the south pole of the moon, a location that humans have never explored. The astronauts will spend a week on the surface exploring and conducting a range of scientific investigations, including collecting water ice, which was discovered for the first time on the moon in 1971. In addition to looking ahead to future projects, NASA mainly concentrates on the first 3 Artemis flights and has already granted contracts for the boosters for rockets up to Artemis 13. In the meantime, Airbus announced in June 2022 that they had received the module's structural components in time for the 4th Artemis mission, allowing astronauts to reside in lunar orbit. Although the rocket launcher was initially scheduled for 2017, it's repeatedly run over budget and behind schedule. Government auditors charged NASA with failing to be open about costs overrun that have raised the final funding by almost $1.8 billion. But this year, it was finally prepared for launch. Unfortunately, engine number 3 failed to reach the required temperature for the launch on August 29th, which NASA reportedly blamed on a possibly malfunctioning sensor. As a result, the first launch attempt was canceled. NASA attempted to relaunch the rocket on September 3rd, but was forced to abort the launch once again because of a persistent hydrogen leak developed during fueling, defying engineers who were making repeated efforts to diagnose this problem. Hurricanes Ian and Nicole delayed NASA's launch schedule even further, to November 16th. Although the weather was kind this time, hydrogen remained a problem. NASA dispatched a team of 3 technicians, known as the Red Crew, to the launch pad when an intermittent hydrogen leak was discovered. They had to tighten bolts that could fully repair the faulty valve on the mobile launcher, which is a sizable platform that supports the enormous rocket under the shadow of a fully fueled rocket. They had success. The Space Force then discovered that one of their radar systems wasn't operating correctly, which was crucial to the launch. It was now necessary to replace an Ethernet switch, which took more than an hour. After that was resolved, the mission proceeded without hiccups. On Wednesday, November 16th, NASA launched its enormous next-gen rocket into space for the first time with a roar illuminating the sky. A brave new era for the United States government space program began with the ignition of the Space Launch System rocket. At 1:47 ET, or AM ET, from Cape Canaveral, Florida, it also represents a significant accomplishment for NASA's Artemis program, which has endured years of setbacks, development hiccups, and enormous expense overruns. Hurricanes and technological issues also contributed to launching delays, including 2 scrubs over the preceding few months. In the final hours before launch, engineers resolved a sporadic hydrogen leak and a broken Ethernet switch. The rocket's core stage fell back to Earth and splashed into the Pacific Ocean. The SLS transported its Orion capsule to an altitude of slightly under 4,000 kilometers. The 2 solid boosters had already split back and fell into the Atlantic. Orion will keep moving until it reaches the moon, which will orbit for a few days before returning to Earth. On December 11th, the capsule is expected to splash down in the water. Orion is unmanned for this mission, aside from 3 mannequins, 2 of which have sensors to detect radiation levels. The new tale of Earthlings trying to step on the moon again ends here. You can like and subscribe to put our channel on SLS. Catch you in the next one. Peace!